Hi, I'm Evelyn. This is Ideas in Practice with Evelyn. In the last episode, I talked about moments where awareness itself started to become uncertain. There were times where I couldn't clearly tell whether I was awake, whether I was dreaming, or whether thinking was happening somewhere in between. But as this process continued, another pattern slowly started to appear. It wasn't only awareness that affected thinking. The environment seems to affect it too. As I continue recording this experience, I started noticing that thinking didn't feel the same across different environments. Some spaces felt stable, quiet, easy to think inside, while other environments felt crowded, fragmented, constantly shifting. And when the environment kept changing, thinking itself changed with it. There were dreams where I kept moving through different locations, from workplaces, classroom, hallways, buses, crowded public space. The environments kept changing. And with every transition, thinking also seemed to shift. Sometimes it became harder to focus, harder to stay connected to one thought, harder to keep continuity. One thing that became especially noticeable was the effect of crowded environments. There were moments where too many people were presented, too many conversations were happening, too many movements were occurring at the same time. And that experience started to feel mentally fragmented. Not because something dramatic was happening, but because attention itself kept getting pulled from different directions. In some dreams, it felt like I was always trying to get somewhere, returning to a seat, entering another room, moving between spaces, adjusting to a new situation. The environment never stayed stable for very long. And when the environment kept changing, thinking also became less stable. There were also moments where the experience itself felt like moving through a system, passing through checkpoints, crowded spaces, rooms, transition, and procedures. Sometimes I was carrying information, documents, or trying to keep track of multiple things while moving between environments. And what became noticeable was the memory itself sometimes started to feel unstable during this transition. There were moments where I could remember the experience clearly while inside it. But once I tried to explain it or record it afterward, parts of it immediately begin to disappear. That suggests that thinking may not only change across environments. The process of remembering and articulating experience may also affect what remains accessible afterward. What became interesting was that awareness still present. Awareness was still present. I knew where I was trying to go, what I was trying to do, who was around me. But even with awareness, thinking sometimes felt overloaded, not completely unclear, but harder to organize. This started changing how I think about cognition and attention. We often assume that thinking happens internally as if it exists separately from the environment around us. But those observations suggest something different. Thinking may also adapt continuously to movement, transition, interruption, surrounding conditions, and social environments. This doesn't only happen in dreams. It also happens in everyday life. There are environments where we think more clearly, focus more easily, and feel mentally organized. And there are other environments where attention becomes scattered, continuously breaks down, and thinking feels more difficult to maintain, especially when we are constantly moving between tasks, conversation, notification, social situation, and digital space. This becomes especially important when thinking about learning. In many educational environments, we often focus on information, content, and outcomes. But the conditions surrounding the learners also matters, because thinking does not happen in isolation. The environment itself may shape attention, continuity, reflection, and the ability to process ideas clearly. In Ideas in Practice, I often explore how ideas develop through observation and reflection. But this observation suggests that ideas may also be influenced by the environments we move through every day, not only internally, but externally as well. And that means thinking may not be fixed. It may continuously adapt depending on where we are, what surrounds us, and how much transition the mind is trying to process at once. Sometimes thinking feels clear and stable. Sometimes it's become fragmented or difficult to follow. And sometimes the environment itself may be part of what changes how thinking behaves. Recognizing that may help us better understanding attention, learning, reflection, and how ideas develop across changing conditions. Thank you for listening to episode 7 of Ideas in Practice with Evelyn. I look forward to continue this conversation with you. Thank you.